Okay, we just talked about egoism briefly, and we raised the question, is it good for me? But I want to talk now a little bit about the notion of what's good, okay? Uh, is it good for me? When we talk about the good, you've got to recognize the fact that there are conflicting goods. There's a difference between something we want and something we need. What I want, I think, is good. It appears to me under the aspect of good. And what I need is something good. All right, it'll help me fulfill myself. All right. Anybody who's on a strict diet, who likes, let's say, cake, knows the cake's not good for them. Who likes sugar, knows the sugar's not good for them. I want sugar, it's not good for me. That's fairly clear. And adults are very, very good at picking this out with kids. We're not so good at picking it out with ourselves. Okay, there's a second difference in goods, too, that conflict, and that's the difference between long-term and short-term. Very, very often we have to give up on things short-term to be gratified later, but the chances of getting the longer, farther away goods are slimmer than the chances of getting nearby goods. So what's the trade-off? And again, if we relate this to business, how much trouble is caused because of people who look for short-term profit rather than the long-term health of the company and the long-term profits. Okay, so there's wants and needs, got to make that distinction, and long and short-term. But there's another very, very important difference, and that's the difference between selfishness and self-interest. When I'm looking out for myself, when I'm looking out for my own goods, if I'm asking if it's good for me, am I being selfish or am I being self-interested? An important difference. There's a biblical injunction, right? Love your neighbor as yourself. That seems to say, don't do your neighbors any favor unless you're looking out for your own goods. Okay? So love yourself. And as a parent, I can tell you, when my kids come in and they like cake and they're not interested, and there's cake on the counter and they're not interested, I think there might be something wrong with them. I want to take their temperature. All right? I want a healthy self-interest in people. That's a good sign. And if you're not looking out for yourself, and if you're not taking care of your interest, who's gonna? Your loved one. Well, they're gonna get bored with it after a while. Take it from me. You may take that or leave that. But at any rate, now, just a sample. I had a lot of kids, so I had 6 kids. We made a piece of cake, or we made a cake, cut it into 6 pieces. First kid comes home from school. He's really, really hungry, and he sees the cake, and he loves the cake. And, of course, he says, can I have a piece of cake? Now, if he comes home from school and he doesn't ask for a piece of cake, I take his temperature, think there's something wrong with him. But this day, he's feeling really, really good, and he wants the piece of cake, and he comes, and he says, piece of cake, can I have it? I say, sure. I made, enough for everybody. So he takes the piece of cake. Okay? Now, his siblings are late to arrive, and 10 minutes later, he still loves cake, and he's still tempted by the cake. And so he goes and takes a second piece of cake. Now, notice, there's no empirical difference between what he did. First time he took the cake, second time he took the cake. But the second time, what he did cost somebody else, all right? That made it selfish, and I want you to make this distinction very, very clear. Self-interest is looking out for your own good, all right? Selfishness is looking out for your own good at the expense of someone else, and that's bad. That's bad. Our society frowns upon that. All right? Okay. So we got to keep that fairly clear. Now, we're still not home free. What exactly is good for us, and how are we going to find that out? Because I want stuff, and we live in an age, everybody decides what's good for them. I don't think that's necessarily the case. Because you can look at somebody who is pursuing their interests, or what they think are their interests, and say they got to get their act together. I think we go to the philosopher Aristotle, and we find out that he gave us some fairly healthy recipes for determining what's good for people. He called it eudaimonia. It gets translated into happiness. probably means living well a little bit better, more than happiness. But living well for him is fulfilling your potential. And how's your potential determined? Well, you look at your needs and you fulfill your needs. And what kind of needs do you have? I've got a former colleague, Hugh Lacey, who laid out these kind of Aristotelian things fairly well. I don't want to take credit for it. It's his layout, and it does follow Aristotle pretty well. So let's see if we can do this. He said, okay, you got to break the needs into three different kinds. There's the material needs, there's activity, the need to be active, because human beings are active, and there's social needs. All right, the material needs what? Health and wealth. We need our health. We can probably be somewhat fulfilled without being healthy, but it's really an uphill battle. All right, and if you ever lived with somebody who's not healthy, it gets to be a drag, truth be told, okay? So a certain amount of health is a good thing. Wealth. How much wealth? Now, that's a question. Aristotle says, and he points out King Midas, he says, what's wrong with King Midas is he's become an accumulator and he wants wealth for its own sake. And if you want wealth for its own sake, there's no limit and it doesn't lead to happiness. Think of Midas, he wanted everything turned to gold, and he found out that he couldn't have his daughter or food or that sort of stuff. So keep that in mind. You need enough wealth to get by. All right, Dickens said, yearly income, 100 pounds, yearly expenses, 99 pounds, happiness. Yearly income, 99 pounds, yearly expenses, 100 pounds, misery. You need just enough to get by, but you don't need all of that. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay, so you need health and you need wealth and you need some other material wants or some other material things filled. But that's basically your material needs. To turn health and wealth into your only goals is to confuse something that's instrumental in living well with what your real purposes and goals are. Second dimension of a human being is that they are active. They got plans, they got ideas, they got futures, they got projects and that sort of stuff. And that makes you fulfilled to live these meaningful things. It's why so many people want meaningful work. All right, not just the drudgery of going into the assembly line and going, putting on the wheels with nothing else. You need some sort of meaningful work. You need to feel like you're going to make a difference. And then the third dimension of human beings that they need to fulfill is dimension of their sociability. People are social animals, according to Aristotle. They don't want to be alone. There's the sad stories of elderly people going to emergency rooms to do what? Simply to get some tender loving care because they don't have anybody around. We need other people. I don't believe Thoreau could live all alone. Remember, Walden Pond had a general store just up the road. He had people in and books in and that sort of stuff. So we need other people. And those are the things we need. Those are the things we need for our essential things. Let me just finish this section with this. Aristotle's caution against wealth accumulation. Some term every quality or art into a means of getting wealth. And that's no good. All right? That turns the instrumental into the final good. How can that be wealth, where a man has a great abundance and yet perishes with hunger? Aristotle says. It can't. Okay? So, that's so much we got to say. What we want to do is find out what the good life is, what's good for us, what's really in our interest, and then we want to go from there. Now, in the next section, I want to take a look at how that gets translated into Adam Smith's theories on the economy.